Dillian the Body Snatcher right here. It's a champ. Big up to Sporting Icon. Subscribe. Otherwise, I might pay you guys a visit.
As I'm sure that you're all aware by now, Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder is no longer happening. So for all intents and purposes, Deontay Wilder is now out of the picture when it comes to Tyson Fury. So these guys will no longer be fighting. Their contract has now expired or due to expire, all that kind of good stuff. Unless, of course, these guys are duping us just to hype the fight. Don't put nothing past anybody, right? But unlikely, right? So Tyson Fury, he will make his UK return, and it will happen in December. Now, as WBC World Heavyweight Champion, he must fight somebody in the top 15. That is what you're looking on your screen right now. So it must be one of these guys. The only way that it will not be is if he's explored all options and offered as many of these guys the title opportunity as they can, and neither one of them is willing to take the fight. Because Fury, it will be a voluntary defense. Then he can move outside the top 15. But right now, it must be a top 15. For me, it will be Agit Kabayel. And I'll explain why as this video goes along. You can see Agit Kabayel's number 15, but that's not why Tyson Fury's choosing him. Okay, I can promise you that. Anyway, I'll explain as this video goes along. Hopefully it makes sense. Maybe you guys have a different opinion, and that's cool. Anyway, we're going to go down the list, and I'll show you why I'm eliminating everybody else. Although there is a couple of real strong possibilities. The WBC interim World Heavyweight Champion, currently Alexander Povetkin. Now, as a side note, before we get into this bit, if something was untoward was to happen, I don't believe that it will, but if before November 21st, before Alexander Povetkin and Dillian Whyte have their rematch, if Tyson Fury was to vacate or get stripped between now and November 21st, Alexander Povetkin, as interim champion, will become full WBC World Heavyweight Champion. That's what interim status is all about. If Fury vacates or gets stripped after November 21st, then Dillian Whyte will become the full WBC World Heavyweight Champion should he defeat Alexander Povetkin. That's what interim status is all about. But very, very unlikely scenario, okay? Either way, for me, we can rule out Alexander Povetkin and Dillian Whyte as these guys have a contractual rematch for November the 21st. Unless, of course, Fury and Frank Warren, Bob Arum and all those involved in Team Fury want to pay either one of those huge money to step away from their contract, it's not going to happen. And I don't believe that will happen anyway. We're in a time where money is a pretty big issue. Okay, so for me, it's not going to be either Alexander Povetkin or Dillian Whyte. Obviously, number one, Deontay Wilder, as we know, he's well out the picture now. And yes, I know that Team Wilder have said, no, we still believe that the fight will be happening in December, blah, blah, blah. And as, of course, they're duping us, for me, no, it ain't going to happen. Plus, Fury, he will be fighting in the UK. Wilder ain't travelling. I'll tell you right now, there's more chance of Santa Claus turning into the Easter Bunny than for Deontay Wilder to be fighting in the UK. It just ain't going to happen. Number two, Alexander Usyk. Well, he's got his fight with Derek Chisora. Derek Chisora, of course, is number 12 on this list as well. It won't be either of those because they have their fight on October the 31st. Also, Alexander Povetkin is, of course, WBO mandatory. So he's in line to take on the winner of Pulev and Joshua. Okay, so he's not going to be fighting Tyson Fury, and nor is Derek Chisora. Although I'm sure if they offered Derek Chisora a whole chunk of money, he'd certainly take that third fight with Tyson Fury. But for me, it ain't going to happen, okay? Number three, Luis Ortiz. Well, it ain't going to happen with Luis Ortiz because Luis Ortiz, he's never really stepped up anyway. Plus for the fact he's a PBC fighter, and plus for the fact he does have a fight already signed, apparently, against Alexander Flores for November sometime. So that is not going to happen. If Luis Ortiz turns down $7 million to take on Anthony Joshua, well, Fury ain't going to offer him $7 million plus more, is he? So that ain't going to happen. So we can rule out Luis Ortiz, as we can rule out Andy Ruiz Jr. For a couple of points on this one, Andy Ruiz Jr., he's shown that ever since he lost to Anthony Joshua, that he wants a couple of tune-up fights, or at least one tune-up fight before he gets back in the world title mix. And he's going to be fighting Chris Arreola in an all-Mexican clash. Again, Andy Ruiz Jr., PBC fighter, so not really going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that there's problems with the PBC and Frank Warren, not at all, okay? But I'm saying that it's unlikely, in addition to the fact that they are actually outside of the international flights, shall we say. It's quite difficult for anybody to really travel. So for me, not that. As I said, number 5, didn't want not going to happen. Number 6, Joseph Parker. Well, he's got a fight with Junior Farr toward the end of the year in an all-New Zealand clash. And Joseph Parker and Tyson Fury are very good friends, and they both said that they would not fight each other unless they kind of had no choice. But that ain't going to happen. Number 7, Daniel Dubois. As we know, he's got his fight on November the 28th against Joe Joyce. So that ain't going to happen, even though it is a in-house fight. Fury versus Daniel Dubois, it's an in-house fight. If it was to happen, then for me, it's for the fans, and it's not going to be on pay-per-view between Daniel Dubois and Joe Joyce, was just a ploy to make it look like BT Sport were willing to do this, but it was always going to be either Daniel Dubois or Joe Joyce taking on Tyson Fury. But unlikely though, right? Anyway, so for me, you can rule out number 7, Daniel Dubois, and number 11, Joe Joyce. Now, here is a realistic possibility. Oscar Rivas. Oscar Rivas only got 1 defeat on his resume, 2 Dillian White. But with Oscar Rivas, while he's not going to have any kind of contractual obligations, I don't believe that he's got a fight coming up. And he doesn't have a promotional deal that will keep him away from potentially fighting Tyson Fury or anybody, really. But I think the only problem with Oscar Rivas in this one is that while he is Colombian, if he is residing in Colombia and still lives in Colombia, then it's going to be quite difficult to get from Colombia to the UK. That's going to be quite difficult. So for me, it's unlikely, but it is a realistic possibility for Oscar Rivas. Number 9, Filip Hrgović. Well, Filip Hrgović, first and foremost, he's still a prospect. He's 10-0. I know he has an extensive amateur career, but as a pro, only 10-0, and he does have a fight coming up with Rydell Booker as well. And of course, he's a matchroom fighter as well. So for me, it ain't going to be Filip Hrgović. Again, with any of these guys, don't rule anybody out 100%, but for me, it ain't going to happen. Number 10, Michael Hunter. Again, a realistic possibility. So it could actually be Michael Hunter. Michael Hunter, of course, he's got 1 loss and 1 draw. The draw was to Povetkin. The loss was to Alexander Usyk. But as a heavyweight, Michael Hunter has shown that he's very, very capable of mixing it in with some of the best guys around. I mean, he's got a win over Martin Piccoli plus others. So it's a possibility Michael Hunter is no longer with Matchroom as well. As a side note, for those of you who didn't know, Matchroom released him. Don't know why. For me, it's a mad move, but it is what it is. So at the minute, unless, of course, he's signed with a promotional company, since the last time I looked, which was probably about a couple of weeks ago, then there's no problem with him taking on Michael Hunter. The only possible glitch in this one could be, again, the international travel from America. But I think Michael Hunter's a realistic possibility, along with Oscar Rivas. Number 11, Joe Joyce, as we've already discussed. That won't be happening. Number 12, Derek Chisora. That won't be happening. And, of course, number 13, Charles Martin. It's a possibility, that's for sure, and potentially a realistic possibility, because I don't think Charles Martin has a fight coming up. If he does, then I've totally missed it. But I think that Charles Martin is a possibility. Yes, he's a PBC fighter, and yes, he is in America, so that's going to have his own sticking points. But it is a possibility, but one that I don't think will happen. Because for me, while people in the UK do know who Charles Martin is, they don't really believe in him. For me, Charles Martin's better than what people think he is. Okay, but he does have a reputation here in the UK because what happened with Joshua is that he's a quitter. And if he fought Fury, he'd end up quitting anyway. Not really interested in watching that fight. I'm opposite mind on that one. For me, I would watch that fight, by the way. But I don't think it's going to be Charles Martin. Number 14, Efe Ajagba, 14-0 Nigerian. Big puncher. But he has had some issues. When he fought, Agit Kabayel, he actually got dropped in that fight. And he hasn't looked great at times, but he's a prospect. And I believe, I don't know whether or not he's still managed by Shelley Finkel. I know he was while he was with the PBC, but now he's gone over to the other network at Top Rank with ESPN. I don't know if Shelley Finkel is still managing him. So either way, I don't think it's going to happen. Bob Arum will see Efe Ajagba as a prospect. He's not going to want his prospect to take a loss. He's going to want to hype Efe Ajagba as his big bad puncher. Okay, so for me, it will not be Efe Ajagba. But of course, I'll watch it if it happened. But for me, it's going to be Agit Kabayel. Agit Kabayel, number 15. He's German, Turkish, undefeated, 20-0, with probably one good win on his resume against Derek Chisora. But again, to be realistic, when that fight happened in Monte Carlo, Derek Chisora just wasn't at the races, and he didn't turn up with his trainer. He had no trainer in his corner, or at least his proper trainer, at least. But I think Agit Kabayel is a realistic opponent, because First of all, he's based here in Europe, so getting from Germany to here is not going to be too much of a problem. Plus for the fact that he is now a top-ranked fighter. So essentially, it's an in-house fight, isn't it? So it's a very, very easy, straightforward fight to make. That's why I believe it will be Agit Kabayel. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if it turns out to be a Oscar Rivas or a Michael Hunter or a Charles Martin, but I think Agit Kabayel, for me, he's a little overrated, to be honest with you. Yes, he got a good win over Derek Chisora, but he spent virtually his entire career fighting lesser opponents. That's what he does, and inactivity as well. But he is former European heavyweight champion, but he could still be European heavyweight champion if he hadn't vacated the belt because he was frightened to death of taking on Joe Joyce. That's the only negative for me when it comes to Agit Kabayel. He's never been keen to be testing himself outside of Derek Chisora. Okay, but anyway, it's going to be an interesting fight, and I believe that Tyson Fury will fight Agit Kabayel because Fury, he likes to take on the undefeated guys where we don't know if they're going to be good or not, such as Agit Kabayel. Maybe he's going to be the real deal, we don't know. But these are the kind of guys that he would like to fight, much like when he fought undefeated Tom Schwartz, undefeated Deontay Wilder, undefeated Otto Wallin. Same thing here. Tyson Fury likes to take the O of a lot of fighters, like he did with Derek Chisora and numerous other ones. So for me, I believe it will be Agit Kabayel. As an in-house fight, both top-ranked fighters, and is no problems with the travelling as well. Maybe you guys will agree, maybe disagree. Either way, drop your thoughts below and let me know. Well, that rhymes a little bit, didn't it? Anyway, drop your thoughts below and I'll catch you all on the next video. Subscribe.